across that threshold. Welcome to Perl for the Programmatically Impaired, an introduction to the Perl programming language for people who are less or not familiar with programming. Okay? Anyway, my name is Russell Fisher. I work at Bluehost. Anyone who works at Bluehost? Anyone? At work, they call me Fish, which is very nice because when I do bad things in code, they can say this code looks a little bit fishy and it's slightly accurate. But the alternate title for my presentation is If Fish Can Perl, So Can You. So if I can do this, anybody can do this. Oh, right. I'm going to make an assertion. Perl is easy. Perl is difficult. It can be difficult. Why? Why is Perl difficult? Some of the primary reasons that I have found why Perl is difficult is legacy code. It used to be the primary language that everything was built in is Perl. It's like PHP of the 90s or something like that. Everything was clutched together in Perl. And another reason why Perl is difficult is we have people who are so clever with their code. There's actually a game called Perl Golf. And the idea of Perl Golf is to take your Perl program that's clear and nice, beautiful, and make it arcane and short and ideally fit into the fewest possible lines. And I am guilty of playing Perl Golf. Ask Emily. She saw the Perl Golf thing that I did. It was horrible. And that's what makes Perl difficult. One of the things. Okay, bad code. Again, Perl is old. It used to be the de facto standard. So a lot of people who started out programming websites, whatever, there's some bad legacy code from that. Oh, code obfuscation. This is really exciting. All right, let's see if I can find it. This wonderful thing is a fully functional Perl program.
Looks like Lisp.
Looks like Lisp, yeah. People intentionally write code to be unintelligible. Can anyone tell me what that's going to do if we run it?
Print hello world.
Well, yeah, but
Make a mess.
it doesn't like that, right? That's so cool. Totally worth 3 pages of pictures that look like the world. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why I have found that Perl is difficult. But Perl is useful. Oh, my 3 main points of this presentation are Perl is useful, Perl is easy to learn. I'm going to try and show you a way to easily learn Perl, and anyone can write Perl. There is a joke, if you're familiar with the joke. The idea is if you take an infinite number of monkeys and you put them in, give them infinite time and an infinite number of typewriters, eventually they will produce the works of Shakespeare. Has anyone heard this allegory or whatever? Yeah? I expect more people to have heard that. The side note of this is the first thing that they produce is a fully functional Perl. One of the most useful things that I've run into with Perl is that little equals tilde. That's for pattern matching. We're not really going to cover it, but it's one of the really useful things of Perl, but it's more difficult. Perl is flexible, it's portable, you can run it anywhere. Everyone who has a computer, I guess any programming language can be run on any place that has. Anyway, but we also have CPAN, which is very exciting. In my journeys, I have come across this comic. Has anyone seen this comic before? Okay. So, right? That's like Java or something. No, that's C. That's C, right? So, one of the cool things about Perl is its ability to do things in more simple fashion. it's much more compact. Okay, this is a little bit of Perl golf. I apologize. But this little tiny thing will do the same thing as all those lines. Yeah? Anyone? Okay, so the idea is, even though Perl is not necessarily easy, Perl can be easy. Any believers? Anyone who's seen my code is not a believer. Okay, one of the biggest things that I've heard that causes confusion for people in Perl is this idea of the sigils. Okay, so Perl has it has more than these, but it has three main sigils that you deal with. The first one's a scalar. A scalar is anything you can write down. Second one is an array, sequential list of whatever. And the third one, the percent, is a hash. A hash is a set of key value pairs. The arrays and the hashes can be as long as you want them to be. But this happens, and this is a terrible thing. You've got sigils and lines and something that references an array into a hash. And it's a very, very evil, wicked, very scary thing. This is one of the things that's actually in the Perl. I changed the word to evil, but this is in one of the Perl tutorials for your beginner references, to learn how to use references. And it makes me want to cry. Okay, so one of the fundamental principles of Perl is this Tim Toady. There's more than one way to do it. I love the idea that Perl is a flexible language. If you have a problem, there are a lot of different ways that you can solve it, and Perl enables you to do those, including the horrible ones. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about is this idea of labels. Labels are something that we as human beings intrinsically understand. We have this concept, this word, this phrase that represents something. Some of the examples that you have used today are Utah. Look, we're in Utah. Okay. Orem, University Parkway, 800 West, Science Building, 259. Anybody recognize that? We're right there. That's this room. Okay, again, scalars can be anything that you can write down. You can write down numbers, you can write down characters, words, sentences, addresses, and nay, verily, even computer address locations. Ooh, this is very exciting. Okay, so scalars are represented by, you can use a scalar for anything because you can have the address, memory address location, which goes to the point in your computer that's storing your array or your hash. And you can identify them by this little square bracket. Square bracket looks like a box. In a box, you can put a bunch of papers and folders. The hash looks like a key. You can store key value pairs. The computer sees array equals, but that doesn't really matter. You understand it as whatever you named your scalar as, whatever you named your variable as. And the idea is, the concept that I want to share with you is you can use scalars for everything. Scalars! Contain your excitement. Scalars! Hey! Okay, so if you're using scalars for everything, it's helpful if you understand the idea of a reference. The reference is War and Peace. What is War and Peace? Anyone? It's a book! It's a really big, long book! But if I tell you War and Peace, you understand it's that book. Even if you've never read it, you understand it's the book. Now, if I tell you Doctor Who, References? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, it's a TV show that lots of people enjoy it. Apparently some people don't. Okay, another potential reference is the Fellowship of the Ring. Right? Okay, so we're going to dereference. Now that little magic operator up at the top, which is my favorite operator in Perl, is a dereference operator. What it means is the computer is going to go to, not go to hell like in C, it's not that. It means it's going to go to the physical address of the reference in memory and look at whatever's there. So, when I say Doctor Who, dereference 9, who is that? No, David Tennant! Alonzi! Yes? Now someone's supposed to contradict me and say he's the 10th Doctor, not the 9th Doctor. Anyone?
He's the 10th.
Oh, you're so wrong! You're making it off by one error. Because it's a 0 index of an array. Oh dear. Alright, and for the Fellowship of the Ring, I decided to go with Gimli, just as our example. Yeah? And my axe, his catchphrase. Pertinent to certain members of the audience. Okay, this is the part that I'm very excited and nervous about with this presentation. I'm going to show you how you can go from 0 to an object-oriented Perl program easily. Okay?
Can we make that plural so it says oops?
Oops. We could. All right. So, I have this mission-critical command line script that I'm running as part of work. And what it does is it just prints, I will not eat things for money 5 times. Right? Does anybody recognize the reference? No. This is one of the things that Bart Simpson writes on the chalkboard. It references back to the part of the slide with Foxtrot. I'm trying to correlate things here. Okay, so the easiest way that you can write a Perl program is just on the command line. A lot of system admins do this. It's why it's the duct tape of the universe. You can do horrible things very easily. Okay, so we're going to take our next step. We're going to make a test Perl file. We're just going to put in here. Put in a carriage line return thingy. And we're going to do this. This is... Okay. Does that look familiar? Based off of what's right there? It's the same thing. Well, I missed out something, but it's the same thing. So what we can do is we can just run Perl on that file, and it will do the exact same thing. Okay? That's our first step. We've now made a file that contains our mission-critical code, so we can ship it to a different server. Okay, now we're going to take our next step, and we are going to put in what a lot of people call the Shebang Line. And that's because it starts with #bang, right? And what this does is this tells the computer where to find the compiler. So you don't actually have to write Perl anymore. And if you change the file so it's executable, you can just run it directly, and it will do exactly the same thing. Okay? All right, we're going to take our next step here, and there is one of the most important things you add at the top of every Perl file you make. Use strict and use warnings. I'll do that in a second. Okay, use strict and use warnings are a safety net. There are many very bad things that you can do with Perl. And use strict and use warnings makes it so you can't do some of the most horrific things. If you ever go into legacy code and you open up your file and you see that it doesn't have use strict and use warnings, and you have some other project you could possibly be doing, go with the other one. Okay. So one thing I forgot is if you don't know where your Perl thing is on your computer, you can hit which. And this will tell you what you need to add as the shebang line. Okay. All right, so let's get a little bit more interesting. We're going to go ahead and make a subroutine. So we're going reusable code. This is so exciting. We're going to call it write lines. And we're going to format it because it's beautiful. And we're going to tell the computer to run the write lines. It does the exact same thing. See, it's exciting. You made your own subroutine. Now you can use that all over in different places. A lot of people went introductory to Perl. You get the for loops and the while loops and the this and the that and the other. I'm taking a different approach on what I'm showing you because there's plenty of coverage on those other things. So you have this reusable function, but you need to use it in a different program, right? So what you want to do is you want to make a module. Has anybody ever made a Perl module? Yeah? I'm going to show you how to make a Perl module. It's so exciting. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to call it student because you're a student and you're writing these lines, right? Start off with the word package, and then the name of the file, and then of course your use strict and your use warnings. Even if it is redundant, having these inside of each and every file is important, just because it's that wonderful safety net. And then you're going to go ahead and make your sub write lines. And you have it reprint. I will not with a carriage return because that way it looks nicer on your screen. We're going to do 4, 1, dot, dot, 5. That'll iterate over it 5 times. And now, if anybody cringed right there, you're in the wrong class. But we're gonna move ahead. Okay. Shh. Okay. So you're going to go ahead and use your student. Okay. We're happy with this. This is going to import the information from your student. And I don't like doing it this way, but this is just kind of an interim to take you to the next step. Does that make sense for everyone? We're importing the information from our student module that we just made, and then we're calling student, and we're running the function write lines. I don't like doing it this way. There's a way to do export, but that's not simple. And yeah, it's horrible. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this because it's so exciting. Oh, it didn't work. Oh. Okay, so when you're writing code, things aren't going to work. Even veteran people, programmers, veteran programmers make mistakes. They make syntax errors, they forget lines. So, we're going to read the message. Student.pm did not return a true value at test, whatever. Does that make sense to anybody? It might not. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take that whole line, well actually just up to there. We're going to switch over here. We're going to paste it in Google. Oh, sorry. Ha! I'll fix it. And, oh my gosh, this first article is this amazing article about this error. Someone else has messed this up before, and they fixed it. And it's documented. The internet is a wonderful and wonderful thing. Back to our presentation. So if you go to that article, you will read maybe 5 lines before it tells you that your Perl module has to end with a true value. So one there. And is anyone excited? I'm excited. It's gonna work! Yay! So we have all made our first Perl module. That wasn't so hard, huh? You have a different file. You call it a PM file. You have package, the name, and then your code, and you enter for 1. Fairly straightforward. Most people could do that. Okay, so I promised you that we would. Oh, question! Right.
Go back to your just the other.
Yes. Which what do we want to see? Student.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we have package student. Use strict. Use warnings. Our subroutine and a 1. Now we're going to take this giant leap into the world of object-oriented programming with a constructor. No, you don't have to keep them in a particular place, but I'm going to show you something soon. Are you okay with that? Oh my gosh, so much. Okay, so enter the realm of our object-oriented programming. We're going to bless thing with shift. Right? That makes sense. No, it doesn't. It makes no sense whatsoever. But if we have time, I'll expand upon that. But if you want to make your module an object, all you need is that single line. What that allows you to do in your test file, oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted, is you can use student, and you can make my Bart equals student. And then, because it's an object, you don't have to have those parentheses. You can just have Bart write his lines. Again, the dereference operator tells the computer to go to where Bart is. Bart is a scalar that contains the student object that we just made with our constructor. Okay? We excited? We're excited? Wait, it's right. Test. Anyone? Think it'll work? No. I was so hopeful. Oh, I am so terrible. I'm a bad person. I put the comma in the wrong place. I always leave off the semicolon at the end, and then it just 10,000 errors. Oh, we're running this. So we now have an object-oriented student module thing that runs our code. Congratulations, you can now all write object-oriented Perl. Right? We're done here. Okay. So, right now, oh, wait, sorry. Oh, I forgot to make a folder. Blessed is a function that creates an object based off of a class. It's the magic thing that Larry made that makes objects.
Larry who?
Larry Wall. Who said that? Larry who? Okay, so we're going to make that object. We're going to put test in there. And we're going to put our student in there. I apologize if this is in the wrong place. Okay, so instead of seeing my home directory, it's going to be embarrassing. You see this namespace that we're using for our object-oriented programming. Sure, it's not too bad right now. We've got 2 files. But as you build out a larger thing, you're going to need to add more things. Larger program, you're going to need more files. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of structure now because we're making it more future-proof, right? Because we want to have an organized file structure. So we're going to make a directory and we're going to call it school, right? We're going to move student into school. Anyone happy with that yet? So student is now in school, and we're going to update it so that everything still works. So we're going to vim school student, and we're going to change this slightly to represent the new file structure. Okay? That double colon is equivalent in this context of saying slash. So in your file structure, you can make as long and nasty and complicated as you possibly want to, and people will hate you. But then we need to go into our test file, and instead of just using school student, we're going to use everything still works. Yes?
What's the difference between .pm and .pl? Your student is .pm, but test is .pl.
Convention. You could have it actually just be test, and because you have that Shebang line up at the top, the computer will automatically know that it's a Perl program that it's executing, so it doesn't matter what you call it. You don't need that PL extension, but in the future, if ever you're looking through old code and you're like, what is this? Having that .pl on there is important so that you know what it's doing. The PM lets you know that it's a Perl module, and that one I think is required. It does need to be a PM. I've never tried it without PM. Good question. Quite good questions. Okay, so one thing that is nice, no, let's do this. Okay, so we have this write lines module. Just one point. When we make an object-oriented file or schema or whatever you want to say, we get this nifty, nifty thing called self that we can shift in on our functions. And what self does, Perl does this really nifty thing where it creates this, you don't need to understand why it does it, but it creates this array with, starting at the beginning, with Bart as your first element, and then any parameters you pass in along the way. It creates this array, and the way to get that array into your functions is by using the shift function in your subroutine. Is by using the shift function. Okay? You may have noticed that is one of those magic words in our constructor. See, our little shift just brings in whatever you throw at it. So this is a very generic constructor that will make anything you throw at it pretty much a module. Ish. We'll say ish. Okay. So while you're making your code, and you're designing things and you're building things, one of the most important, useful things to be able to do is to be able to see what is going on while you're running it. And there is a module, quote, something about standing on the shoulders of giants. Has anybody heard that quote?
I have.
Yay! It's a wonderful quote. And Perl very much allows you to stand on the shoulders of giants. And one of the giants that I have stood on a lot is a fellow by the name of Paul Siemens. And he works at Bluehost, and he made this beautiful module called Debug. And we were able to publicly release it under the namespace on CPAN of Data Debug. Okay? And it's, what it allows you to do is you just type in debug, and you can throw anything at it, and when you run your module or your script, it will show you what, see, this is our debug, our BART object. Okay, so you can see what's going on inside of your program as it's running. And while you're building it, you're debugging something, hence data debug, it's great. it is very useful to be able to do that. So, our write-lines function, okay, our write-lines function is boring. I think it's really boring. I think it's lame. So we're going to go ahead and update it and change it and make it cooler, right? Because you want to add features. Let's do it. Right. Okay. Now when you're making you can throw pretty much anything you want to at a Perl subroutine and it will just slurp it up because it builds that array starting with your object and taking anything that you pass in. So we're going to just use the hash reference. You remember the hashes? We're going to just use a reference of a hash and we can throw anything into that hash and it'll come straight through to this program. And it's very easily used. So we want to be able to have a customizable message. So, like Gimli in the Fellowship of the Rings, we're going to take our message out of args with the key value of message. Or we're going to say, I will not eat or money. Okay? Works, right? We have this, when you pass it in like this, you pull it out of the key, out of the hash ref, and if it's not there, you can just put an OR, and then whatever you want it to be by default, and if you don't pass it, it will automatically be that message, what you put in as its default value. So we're going to add another feature to this. We're going to say this is going to be our args lines, or 5, right? This will allow us to do exactly the same thing, but now our very rigid, clunky subroutine that only does one thing can now do, we'll call it, that works. Okay, so we come over here. Now we can work some wonderful magic on what we give to the subroutine that makes our, I don't want to do that.
You used a back comma.
Back comma.
Oh, shit. It's not recorded and going to be posted on the universe. Okay, so our program still does exactly what it was meant to do, but now we have more flexibility. So we're going to name our test file, and when we pass it, we're going to pass it this hash reference. A hash reference is just a scalar. We don't care what this is named. We don't care, we don't need to define it as anything. Just passing it in, it will be automatically put into that special array that Perl will hand off, and then it will just slurp into our subroutine as our args. Does that make sense? Anyone? Anyone? So we're going to say, now we've made a small change, and now Bart writes, I cannot grant indulgences. Just by changing the arguments that we pass in there, by adding it to a hash ref, it comes in, and we have a lot of flexibility and power. And let's use our second one that we created to give you another example. Did I say learnings? Okay.
Line.
I just used line.
It was line as the key. Line was the scalar in your. Sorry, it was lines.
It's lines. Okay, I forget things tremendously often. Okay, so we can pass as many parameters as we want to into that function. We don't have to make any modifications into the way that that data is pulled in. Does that make sense? Now, we only get 3 I cannot grant indulgences because in our student, in our args, this is just a generic container, it's a hash, key value pairs. We have message, which we automatically set to default if it isn't there. And we have the number of lines that we want to create, or 5 if it's not there. Just prints out whatever we pass it, or this, however many times we pass it, or 5. So we have a lot of flexibility with that. Now say we need multiple objects. Oh, right. No. We're going to make Ralphie. Right. There we go. Now, we're going to run that. And Bart writes, I cannot grant indulgences 3 times. And then Ralphie comes along and he does the default action. He writes, I will not eat food for money 5 times. Because those are our default values. Okay? And they are completely different. Let's see. Sort.
Where's the
I'm glad I have help.
That was a good example of what script does.
Yes. It doesn't allow me to do things that are horrible. Okay. So we understand Bart to be Bart. Makes sense to us. The computer understands Bart to be this memory address location. And it understands Ralphie to be this memory address location. Those should not be the same. Okay. I'm glad those aren't the same because then my entire universe would be crumbling down around my eyes and I would probably cry. Nobody wants to see that. Oh. Oh, we don't care about Ralph. Poor Ralph. Oh, what do we want to have Ralphie say?
I beat the smart kid.
I beat the smart kids. It's so wonderful. So, if we want to do that, sure. I know my formatting is terrible. Some people get really into like the alignment of your commas. Oh, it's terrible.
You'll be docked later.
Huh?
You'll be docked later.
I'll be docked later. Okay, so now Ralphie is going to say, I beat the smart kids, and he's going to do it in our default value of 5 times. And I need to get rid of that print value. Okay. Okay, so we have this very useful, flexible function, which is nice. And let's go ahead and make our constructor method. Now, even though you can use this one-liner Perl golf appropriate sub new as your constructor, what it actually does is it brings in our class. And this is what kind of an object we're going to be making, so we're going to shift that in. And then we're going to have args, just like we do down in that subroutine. We're going to shift that in, or we're going to have it just be an empty hash ref. Just an empty container of key value pairs.
So that's in case it's the second argument is empty, or is that?
Yeah, if there is no second argument, you want your creator to still be able to make the object, even if you don't throw any spaghetti at it. So we're going to do Larry's patented magical bless on our args with our class. We're going to call that itself, because that's just the cool thing to do. We're going to return ourself. Strict would have caught that as well. So before we write our messages, we want to know a little bit more about what we're doing. So we're going to go ahead and print off okay? We're just going to have it say somebody's detention. So that allows us the flexibility to be able to pass something into our constructor that is the name. And we're going to go ahead and say it's Bart, because our object is Bart. And when we run it, it'll say Bart's detention. Oh, I forgot the name. New line character, very nice. I like to add eyes at random places because I use Vim, and I shouldn't be allowed to use Vim. Okay, so we're going to run it. Bart's detention, right? So what if we have, you know how we have these default values of our messages and our number of lines? What if we wanted to have go ahead and make a default value for our name. No. Students. This works well for me. So, all right, we'll just call them students and say that they're strudels. So Bart's detention gets Bart, but if we take that out of our constructor when we build it, it's going to say our student. Now you are all experts. Students detention. Now you guys are all experts and you can take this wonderful command line. Okay, sorry. Inheritance, Vim, school. We're going to make a teacher. And here, we're going to say package school, teacher. Again, our use strict, our use warnings. And then we're going to do something nifty, and we're going to use our base, because we live in the land of I've done Perl 5.8 too long. We're going to say school student. And then, of course, we end our routines with 1. So we're going to Vim our test file. I apologize. Okay, we're going to make Edna. And and we're going to make Edna the teacher. And we're going to have Edna write lines, right? And because we're using a different object, we also need to use that. When we run this, we have student 1, which is Bart, and then student 2, which is Edna, and Edna is not going to eat food for money, but Edna is a teacher. Edna doesn't need to worry about writing her lines, so she's going to take this opportunity to override the write lines function. And this is polymorphism. You take an object and you inherit it, and you change the function into something else. We could do something else, but I'm going to just, real quick, print goes for a smoke. Because it's Edna Krabappel. Run it. I should do that. That's a good idea. Good idea. 10 points. Okay, so Bart does his lines and Edna goes for a smoke. Okay, so we went from 0 to object-oriented programming with all sorts of fun things. You can make awesome constructors. You can pass arguments into functions. You can make anything stick anywhere by just passing in a very simple array reference when you call a function. And it's beautiful. Simple, and I love Perl. I'm a Perl advocate, Tim Toady. There's many ways to do it. Some are really bad. So be careful. Almost always, simple and straightforward is 100 million times better than clever. When you make a subroutine, you make your subroutine do one thing. You make it do it straightforward, you make it do it clear, and then you use it where, don't laugh at me.
I'm going to say result good.
And that will allow you to have code that's maintainable. There's a lot of resources available to learn Perl. Google. Okay, there we go. I want you to learn Perl. Yay! There's this really cool video by Khan Academy called You Can Learn Anything. It's inspirational. There's an article by Cracked saying the 6 harsh truths that will make you a better person. If you want to be able to get a job, you want to be the person that your employer wants to give a job to. You want to be able to have something to offer. 6 harsh truths. In conclusion, Perl is useful. Perl is easy. Can be easy. And you can learn Perl! And we don't have any time for questions. I'm sorry. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, good. Bye.